What if everything Prince Harry thought he knew about his own family was a lie? What if the very child he has defended, celebrated, and introduced to the world as his own, Archie Harrison, was proven, in black and white, not to be his? That's the kind of revelation that doesn't just rattle a marriage. It shakes the foundations of a monarchy. And yet, this isn't a whispered rumor tucked away in tabloids. This is a revelation dragged into the unforgiving light of a courtroom, where silence echoes louder than screams, and one DNA report threatens to unravel not only Harry's future, but the royal legacy itself. Imagine the weight of that moment. One sheet of paper, a few lines of text, cold scientific evidence pitted against years of emotional bonds and public appearances. Now ask yourself this. If you were in Harry's shoes, could you accept it? Could you look into the eyes of a child you've raised, a child the world recognizes as yours, and admit that biology says otherwise? Or would you do what Harry did? Fight, deny, rage, and let your entire life spiral into chaos? While Harry clung to his mother's mysterious letter like a drowning man gripping driftwood, Meghan was already shifting into a higher gear. If Harry was spiraling inward, Meghan was turning outward, calculating, plotting, striking. To her, the scandal wasn't about truth or bloodlines. It was about control. And Meghan, unlike Harry, wasn't about to surrender hers. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Behind closed doors, Meghan was ruthless. She called her lawyers, her publicists, her Hollywood allies. She knew the palace was circling like vultures, ready to use Harry's meltdown as proof of his instability. She knew the tabloids were sharpening their knives, eager to crown her the villain of the century. So, she moved first. A meeting was convened in Montecito, insiders whispered. Not at their home. Too risky, too many prying eyes, but at a discreet luxury hotel where rooms could be swept for bugs and entrances shielded from paparazzi. Meghan sat at the head of the table, notes organized, voice calm. Around her sat lawyers who specialized in reputation management, PR advisors skilled in spinning disasters into triumphs, and a few carefully chosen confidants who knew how to keep their mouths shut. Her directive was simple, yet chilling. This is not a scandal about DNA. This is a scandal about cruelty. About a man being torn apart by an institution desperate to protect itself. With those words, Meghan reframed the entire narrative. No longer was Harry the delusional prince fighting facts. He was the victim, the fragile man broken by centuries of royal lies, gaslit into madness. And Meghan? She was his protector, his rock, his only constant in a world that sought to destroy him. The brilliance of the strategy was undeniable. It painted Harry's breakdown not as weakness, but as proof of trauma, and it positioned Meghan as the strong, stoic partner, quietly enduring humiliation while standing by her man. Never mind the private message leak that suggested otherwise. Meghan was ready to spin even that into her story. Yes, I feared he would implode, she rehearsed before her team. Because I've watched how this family chews people up. Because I've lived through their cruelty myself. And I knew they would break him too. It was PR alchemy. Turned betrayal into compassion, turned strategy into sacrifice. And then came the counterattack in the media. Meghan's allies began planting sympathetic stories in friendly outlets. Words like resilient, dignified, and protective appeared in headlines. Carefully chosen photos of Meghan looking serene, composed, even maternal circulated online, contrasting sharply with images of Harry raging and unraveling. Late-night leaks to select journalists painted Meghan as the one who was holding the family together, while Harry struggled under the weight of generational trauma. Ask yourself, can a narrative save a reputation? In Meghan's case, the answer was yes, at least for a while. Because as Harry's behavior grew more erratic, Meghan's image grew more polished. She became, in the eyes of her defenders, a martyr, a woman sacrificing her peace to protect a husband crushed by the weight of his legacy. But Meghan didn't stop there. She prepared for the legal battlefield too. Rumors spread that she had quietly consulted custody experts, probing how DNA revelations might affect Archie's legal status in a potential divorce. The whispers were chilling. Was Meghan preparing to distance herself from Harry entirely if he became too unstable? To position herself as the sole protector of Archie against a father the world saw as broken? Harry, of course, had no idea. While he locked himself in his study with Diana's letter, Meghan was weaving a net that could catch her no matter how far he fell. If he recovered, she'd stand by him as the loyal wife. If he collapsed completely, she'd step forward as the strong survivor, shielding her son from chaos. Either way, Meghan won. And here's where the contradiction hooked the world again. Meghan's public silence made her seem composed. Her private strategy made her seem calculating. Which version was real? Was she the loyal wife or the cold tactician? The line blurred more with every passing day. But Meghan's most devastating move hadn't happened yet. Because her counterattack wasn't just about shaping public opinion. It was about shaping Harry's fate. And when she finally made her boldest move, even Harry saw it not as protection, but as betrayal. Because Meghan wasn't just defending herself. She was preparing to sacrifice Harry if it meant saving her own name. But then Meghan made a move that even Harry saw as the ultimate betrayal. This is not just a scandal. This is a collision between truth and denial, between bloodlines and bonds of love, between one man's fragile heart and the ruthless machinery of monarchy. The stakes? Everything. His marriage, his reputation, his sanity, even the very question of Archie's place in history. Because here's the chilling part. When paternity becomes a question, legitimacy becomes a weapon. And in the House of Windsor, legitimacy has always been the crown's most carefully guarded treasure. From the very beginning, the world was told a fairy tale. The ginger-haired prince finds his Hollywood bride. They fall in love against all odds. And soon comes a baby who symbolizes modernity, diversity, and a fresh chapter for the monarchy. But fairy tales often hide darker truths. And this one, it seems, was destined to implode. Think back to the first photos of baby Archie. Wrapped in a white blanket, cradled by parents who seemed glowing with joy. Back then, no one could have guessed that whispers about his birth, rumors about surrogacy, and questions about resemblance would one day be dragged into the harsh spotlight of a courtroom battle. Yet here we are. Why does this matter now? Because Harry himself has made it impossible to ignore. His refusal to accept the DNA results wasn't just a private denial. It was a public spectacle, an implosion of royal dignity that has fueled debates across continents. Some say he's a man protecting his child no matter what. Others say he's delusional, unraveling before our eyes. And the truth? It may be far more disturbing than either camp realizes. Picture the courtroom scene. The judge sits high, reading the results with the kind of clinical detachment only the law can manage. Lawyers shuffle their papers, their eyes darting nervously toward the royal box. The press sits ready, pens poised, cameras whispering with anticipation. And then there's Harry, his face pale, jaw tight, eyes blazing. He's not just hearing words. He's hearing the shattering of his entire identity. He's hearing betrayal. He's hearing the ghosts of his past, his mother's suffering, his lifelong sense of being the spare, the outsider in a gilded cage. And now, with these results, even fatherhood is ripped from him. But denial can be powerful. Instead of acceptance, Harry erupts. He pounds the table. He shakes his head violently, his voice cracking as he insists the test must be wrong. This is a mistake. This cannot be true. His lawyers glance at him, some with pity, others with panic. Meghan sits beside him, silent, her face a mask of cold control. That silence, in fact, screams louder than Harry's rage. Did she know? Has she always known? The audience, both in the courtroom and around the world, is left gasping at the contrast. The prince unraveling, the duchess unmoved. And yet, here's the contradiction that makes this story so captivating. Science doesn't care about royal titles. DNA doesn't bend for emotion. But Harry is trapped in the only way a human can be, between the heart's truth and the body's truth. And when those truths collide, madness isn't far behind. Ask yourself, would you rather cling to love or surrender to facts? Would you rather protect a child's identity or protect the monarchy's integrity? These are the impossible questions Harry faces, and he's failing in front of millions. It's easy to see this as just gossip, another royal scandal to splash across tabloids. But go deeper. This is about a man whose entire life has been defined by lineage, suddenly confronted with the idea that his own bloodline might not continue through the child he's called his son. It's about the monarchy, an institution obsessed with heritage, suddenly faced with a crack that could undermine generations of power. It's about love, lies, and the unbearable price of truth. The courtroom itself becomes theater. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Journalists race to file breaking updates. Outside, the public splits into camps. One side demands Harry face reality. The other side defends his emotional outburst as the act of a loving father under attack. On social media, hashtags trend worldwide. Memes explode, late-night comedians feast on the drama. And yet behind the humor lies something chilling. A prince's descent into chaos, recorded in real time. And yet, as Harry rages, refusing to accept what science tells him, the story doesn't end. It only begins. Because what happens next isn't just about Harry's denial. It's about the silent power plays happening all around him. Meghan's silence. The palace's response. William's confrontation. And above all, the question every single viewer, reader, and royal insider is asking. If Harry isn't the father of Archie Harrison, then who is? That question alone is enough to split the monarchy down the middle. It forces us to look back at every photo op, every carefully staged royal event, every interview where Harry and Meghan painted their family as untouchable. Suddenly, cracks appear in hindsight. The rushed birth announcement, the secrecy around Archie's godparents, the absence of clear hospital records. At the time, these seemed like odd choices. Now, they look like clues. Were we blind to the truth all along? Or was the truth deliberately hidden from us? The introduction of this story is not just setting the stage. It's the first act of a royal tragedy. One where love, power, and denial collide in the harshest way possible. And the deeper we go, the more we realize that this isn't just about Harry and Meghan. It's about the monarchy itself. It's about whether truth has any place left in an institution built on secrecy, control, and image. And as we pull back the curtain on the drama inside that courtroom, we're left with one undeniable fact. This story isn't over. It's only spiraling deeper, darker, and more dangerous. Because the moment the judge's voice echoed through that courtroom, announcing those DNA results, the story of Archie Harrison shifted forever. And Harry, red-faced, shaking, shouting, was left clinging to a reality that may never return. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The air in the courtroom was suffocating. Not because of the size, not because of the heat, but because of the tension that seemed to vibrate through the walls, settling into the bones of everyone present. Reporters shifted uncomfortably on their benches, fingers hovering over keyboards, waiting for the moment that would define headlines for decades. Lawyers shuffled papers, their eyes darting between their clients and the bench. And at the center of it all sat Prince Harry. Stiff-backed, jaw clenched, eyes darting from the judge to the document in his hands as though the letters might rearrange themselves if he glared hard enough. This wasn't just any courtroom proceeding. This was history in the making. A modern royal scandal, unfiltered, raw, and merciless. The type of story that future generations would whisper about when speaking of the collapse of royal tradition. The DNA results were about to be read aloud, and in that moment, everyone in the room knew they weren't just about to hear science. They were about to watch a prince's world come crashing down. Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. The judge's voice rang out, solemn and unyielding. Harry's chest heaved as though each word was a blow. The rest of the sentence blurred for him, as though his ears had filled with static. But the final words cut through with surgical precision. Paternity not consistent with Prince Henry Charles Albert David of Wales. There it was. Cold, clinical, undeniable. The air left Harry's lungs like a punch. He shook his head violently, his lips parting in disbelief. No, he muttered under his breath. But the microphones caught it, and the word rippled through the courtroom like a cannon blast. The gallery gasped. Some reporters instinctively hit send on half-written stories, knowing they had enough to ignite a firestorm. Others sat frozen, unable to process the magnitude of what had just been confirmed. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't speculation. This was official. And Harry? He exploded. "This is wrong," he shouted, rising to his feet so suddenly that Meghan flinched beside him. His face was crimson, veins throbbing at his temples. "This is not true. Do you hear me? This is a lie." His fist slammed against the polished wood of the defendant's table, rattling glasses of water and jolting everyone around him. Lawyers whispered urgently, trying to calm him, but Harry was beyond reason. Have you ever watched someone unravel in real time? Have you ever seen a man fight against the inevitable tide of truth, clawing desperately for a lifeline that doesn't exist? That's what the world witnessed that day. And it wasn't just heartbreaking, it was shocking. Because here was the same Harry who once projected strength in combat zones, who stood proudly beside Meghan to confront racism and tradition, reduced to a broken figure, raging against a piece of paper. The judge, unmoved, called for order. But order was the last thing Harry could manage. He pointed at the opposing lawyers, his voice cracking with a mixture of fury and despair. You planted this. You paid someone off. You think you can destroy me, but you won't. The irony, of course, was that the very evidence Harry accused of being fake was rooted in the one thing he could never escape: biology. DNA doesn't lie. But Harry wouldn't accept it. Meghan sat frozen, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face unreadable. That silence, sharp, deliberate, spoke volumes. Did she already know? Was this result no surprise to her? While Harry crumbled, Meghan's calmness seemed almost eerie, and the contrast didn't go unnoticed by those in the room. The murmurs grew louder. Reporters scribbled notes. Harry loses control. Meghan unmoved. Royal scandal explodes. Cameras clicked like gunfire, immortalizing the moment Harry stood red-faced, fists clenched, a man in complete denial. Ask yourself, if you were Harry, what would you do? Would you accept the test and walk out broken? Or would you rage, scream, and fight against a truth too unbearable to comprehend? That's the tragedy of this moment. Harry wasn't just battling the court. He was battling himself. The courtroom turned into chaos. The judge ordered a recess, gavel slamming down again and again to restore order. But the damage was done. Outside, news outlets blasted push notifications. Shocking. DNA results reveal Harry not Archie's father. Social media erupted in real time. Hashtags forming like wildfire. Hashtag Harry DNA. Hashtag Royal Scandal. Hashtag not the father. Within minutes, the story was global. And yet, in that same moment, something else was happening. Inside Harry's mind, denial hardened into defiance. He turned to Meghan, searching her face for support, for comfort, for anything. But her eyes remained cold, distant. That silence was a knife, sharper than the DNA results themselves. Say something, he barked at her, but Meghan remained composed, lips pursed, gaze fixed on the judge's bench. To Harry, that silence was betrayal. To the public, it was mystery. The clash between Harry's volcanic outburst and Meghan's eerie calm left everyone in the room, and watching from afar, with more questions than answers. Did Meghan know the truth long before Harry? Was this all part of a plan? Or was she simply stronger, colder, more controlled in the face of catastrophe? But just when it seemed the chaos had peaked, a ripple moved through the courtroom crowd. Reporters leaned toward one another. Lawyers whispered. Something else had surfaced, something even more shocking than the DNA report itself. Because what Harry did next didn't just stun the judge or the public. It stunned Meghan too. And it changed the course of the scandal forever. But what Harry did next left even Meghan completely stunned. Silence. That was Meghan's weapon of choice in the courtroom, and it was more devastating than any outburst Harry could muster. While her husband was on his feet, red-faced and spitting fury at the judge and lawyers, Meghan sat perfectly still, hands folded neatly in her lap, her back straight, her expression a mask of icy calm. Not a tear, not a word, not even the faintest tremor in her jaw. For someone who had built her brand on carefully chosen words, on interviews that shaped public narratives, on speeches laced with emotion, her refusal to react was deafening. And the world noticed. The cameras that had captured Harry's meltdown immediately swung toward her. What they saw was a woman carved out of marble, her composure unshakable even as the ground crumbled beneath her husband. Some called it strength. Others called it calculation. But almost everyone agreed, it was chilling. Ask yourself, what does silence mean in a moment like that? Does it scream guilt? Or does it whisper control? Does it reveal a woman who already knew the truth, or one who refuses to let anyone else dictate her reaction? As Harry's voice cracked, demanding justice, demanding someone acknowledge his pain. Meghan's silence became the story within the story. People in the gallery leaned forward, straining to catch even the slightest flicker in her eyes. Did she look at Harry with sympathy? With disgust? With indifference? Those who were close enough to see swear that her eyes flickered once, a brief glance at him, then back to the judge, measured, deliberate, and detached. For Harry, it was maddening. His outburst was fueled not just by the DNA report, but by the fact that the one person he expected to stand by him, his wife, wasn't standing at all. She wasn't reaching for his hand. She wasn't whispering reassurances. She wasn't even blinking in his direction. That silence, that absence of solidarity, cut deeper than the judge's words ever could. "Meghan," he hissed, desperate raw. But Meghan remained unmoved. Later, analysts would debate endlessly about this silence. Was it shock? Was it betrayal? Was it a calculated PR move? In the royal soap opera, silence is rarely neutral, it's strategy. And Meghan, ever the strategist, seemed to understand the power of saying nothing while Harry destroyed himself. Meanwhile, whispers spread like wildfire around the courtroom. Reporters jotted notes. Meghan silent. Did she know? Harry unravels. Meghan calm. Tweets blasted across the globe within seconds, painting Meghan as everything from a stoic queen-in-waiting to a cold manipulator who had abandoned her husband in his darkest hour. And the irony? Meghan didn't have to lift a finger. She didn't need to say a word. Her silence did the work for her. But here's the twist. Silence can be temporary. And the longer she withheld, the more the world demanded to hear from her. What would Meghan say when she finally broke her silence? Would she support Harry? Would she admit the truth? Would she spin the narrative in her favor, as she has so many times before? The palace, watching from behind closed doors, was already preparing for impact. They knew Meghan's words, whenever they came, could either steady the ship or sink it completely. But what's more important is what that silence did to Harry. It wasn't just absence, it was abandonment. For a man who has always carried deep scars of loss, that coldness reopened every wound. He thought back to Diana, to the feeling of being alone, unsupported, unheard. And now, here in this courtroom, with cameras capturing his every twitch, he realized his wife had chosen silence when he needed her most. Have you ever felt that kind of betrayal? That sense that the person sitting right beside you is miles away, watching you drown without so much as reaching out a hand? That was Harry's reality in that moment. And Meghan? She wasn't just silent in the courtroom. Later that night, when the world was clamoring for answers, when the press hounded their car as they left, Meghan remained silent still. No words to the reporters. No statements to the press. No leaks through anonymous friends. Just a tight smile, a flash of camera light, and then the door of the car slamming shut. Her silence became the most powerful noise of all. But silence doesn't last forever. And when Meghan finally broke it, not in court, but in a carefully controlled setting, the words she chose didn't just defend her. They ignited a storm so fierce, so uncontrollable, that even Harry, already drowning in denial, was pulled under its waves. Because Meghan's silence wasn't avoidance. It was strategy. And when she finally spoke, she knew exactly what she was doing. Yet when she finally broke her silence later that night, her words ignited a storm that no one could contain. Buckingham Palace has survived wars, scandals, abdications, and betrayals. Its walls have heard the whispers of kings and the tears of queens. Yet when the DNA results of Archie Harrison reached the monarch's desk, even those ancient walls seemed to shiver. For centuries, the monarchy has relied on one unshakable truth: bloodlines. The crown passes from father to son, from heir to heir, legitimized not by politics, but by lineage. And now, for the first time in modern history, that sacred chain was shattered by a laboratory report. The moment the news hit, chaos rippled through the palace. Aides rushed down hallways, clutching their phones, whispering into earpieces. Senior advisors demanded emergency briefings. Private secretaries scrambled to prepare statements that might never see the light of day, but had to exist in case the dam burst completely. In the midst of this whirlwind sat King Charles, pale and furious, staring at the report as though it were a personal betrayal. For Charles, the scandal was not just about Harry. It was about legacy, survival, and the humiliation of the monarchy in front of the world. Imagine being the king whose reign was defined not by triumph, but by the illegitimacy of your grandson. Imagine knowing that the very public you are meant to lead sees your family not as the pinnacle of tradition, but as a soap opera imploding in real time. Charles muttered under his breath, "It cannot be allowed to continue like this." But what could he do? Deny science? Silence Harry? Pressure Meghan? The monarchy's golden rule has always been to never complain, never explain. But in this case, silence felt like surrender. And then there was William, the heir to the throne, the steady hand, the one meant to embody stability while his younger brother spiraled. His reaction was far more personal than political. Those close to him revealed his first words were not about the monarchy, but about Harry. He'll destroy himself before he sees the truth. William knew his brother's stubbornness, his refusal to let go once he'd gripped a narrative. And William also knew the danger. If Harry rejected the DNA results, the scandal would not just damage him, it would engulf the entire royal family. Camilla, ever pragmatic, advised Charles to keep distance. "This is Harry's mess," she said coldly, according to palace whispers. "Let him drown in it. The crown must stand apart." But Princess Anne disagreed. Known for her bluntness, she argued that allowing Harry to flail publicly without intervention would tarnish the institution permanently. "People see weakness, they remember it," she reportedly said, "and they'll never forget." Inside the palace, old wounds resurfaced. Some compared Harry's defiance to Edward VIII's abdication scandal, a selfish choice that nearly toppled the monarchy. Others whispered Diana's name, noting how her shadow still loomed, how her sons had become living symbols of her legacy. Diana had battled with truth and betrayal too. But this was different. This was a direct attack on the monarchy's lifeblood. Meanwhile, courtiers wrestled with logistics. What would Archie's status be if Harry wasn't the father? Would he lose his titles? Could succession law even account for this unprecedented crisis? For centuries, legitimacy was assumed, protected by secrecy and silence. But DNA was merciless. It didn't care about crowns or traditions. It only cared about truth. Ask yourself, if the monarchy's entire foundation rests on lineage, what happens when that lineage is questioned? What happens when the future of the crown is entangled not in love stories and fairy tales, but in scandals and scientific proof? The public's reaction didn't make things easier. Protesters gathered outside the palace gates, demanding transparency. "Tell us the truth about Archie," read one banner. Others jeered about taxpayer money funding a family that couldn't even manage its own bloodline. Across the Commonwealth, debates erupted. Could a monarchy so fragile still claim relevance in the 21st century? And then came the private fury of Charles directed toward Harry. Palace insiders revealed that Charles called his younger son that evening, his voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he demanded. Harry, already unraveling, barked back. "I'm the victim here. They're framing me." That exchange marked a breaking point. Father and son, once fragilely bonded by grief and duty, were now irreparably divided by suspicion and denial. But William's reaction was different. He didn't just see scandal, he saw danger. He knew Harry well enough to understand that denial would become obsession, obsession would become self-destruction, and self-destruction would drag them all down with him. William decided something had to be done. And unlike Charles, he wouldn't just yell down a phone line. He would confront his brother directly. Behind closed doors, the palace prepared for war. Advisors whispered about disownment, about stripping titles, about exile. Some suggested using Meghan as a scapegoat, painting her as the manipulator while preserving Harry's dignity. Others argued it was already too late. Harry's behavior had already burned bridges beyond repair. But amid all this chaos, one truth became clear. The monarchy itself was on trial. And whether Harry realized it or not, his refusal to accept the DNA results was not just his downfall. It was a weapon aimed directly at the crown. The palace could not control Harry's outbursts in court. They could not silence Meghan's eventual words. They could not hide from the cameras. But perhaps, just perhaps, William could control his brother. Perhaps, with the right words, the heir could confront the spare and pull him back from the brink. And so, late one night, William requested a private meeting with Harry. A meeting not as brothers in arms, not as members of the same bloodline, but as two men standing on opposite sides of truth. No staff, no lawyers, no Meghan, just William and Harry, face to face. What happened in that room was not just a conversation. It was a battle between reason and denial, between responsibility and rebellion, between a future king and a man who refused to believe his world was crumbling. But when William privately confronted Harry, the brothers' conversation turned into an all-out war. William arrived late in the evening, his car slipping quietly through the side gates of Kensington. There were no cameras here, no aides hovering with notepads, no staff to shield them from each other. For once, it was just the two brothers, face to face, stripped of ceremony, stripped of excuses. And yet the tension between them was thick enough to choke on. Harry stood rigid near the window, pacing like a caged animal. His fists were balled, his chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. The echoes of the courtroom humiliation still clung to him. He turned sharply as William entered. "You came to gloat, didn't you?" Harry spat, his voice trembling with fury. William's face remained calm, but his eyes burned with frustration. "I came to talk to you before you destroy yourself completely." That opening line set the tone. No warmth, no brotherly hug, just blunt reality. Harry sneered, his jaw twitching. "Destroy myself? I'm fighting lies, Will. Lies that are meant to tear my family apart." William stepped closer, his voice steady, measured. "No, Harry, you're fighting the truth. And the longer you fight it, the worse this will get. For you, for Meghan, for the monarchy, for Archie." The word Archie made Harry flinch as though struck. "Don't you dare," he growled. "Don't you dare question my son." But William didn't flinch. "Harry, listen to yourself. You've seen the results. Everyone's seen them. Denial won't change the facts." Harry's laugh was bitter, almost unhinged. "Facts? You think I trust their so-called facts? They've been against me from the start. The palace, the press, the system. You. Always you." There it was. The years of resentment spilling out like poison. Harry stepped closer, his finger jabbing at William's chest. "You've always wanted me to be the weak one, the spare, the failure. Now you've got your chance. You can stand tall as the perfect heir while I'm torn to pieces." William's face tightened. For a moment, the mask of calm cracked. "This isn't about me, Harry. It's about the truth. About Archie. About what comes next. You think screaming at judges and blaming conspiracies will protect him? It won't. You're making it worse." Harry's eyes glistened, rage mixing with grief. "So what then? You want me to accept it? To admit that my own son isn't mine? That I've been lied to all these years? That Meghan—" He stopped himself, his voice breaking. That pause told William everything. He saw it. The doubt gnawing at Harry. The fear he couldn't voice. The truth he couldn't face. William softened slightly, lowering his voice. "Harry, maybe you need to ask questions you've been too afraid to ask." Harry's face twisted with anguish. Don't you dare suggest she." But William cut him off. His words landed like a blade. "I'm saying what you're too afraid to say. If you're not Archie's father, then who is?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Harry's breath came in shallow gasps. His fists unclenched, then clenched again, his body trembling. His mind flashed through years of Meghan's reassurances, the secrecy around Archie's birth, the strange inconsistencies that everyone else had noticed but he had dismissed. For a brief second, the fight drained out of him. His shoulders slumped, his eyes searching William's face for answers he didn't want to hear. "You think she knew?" he whispered. William hesitated, then chose the blunt truth. "I think she's not as surprised as you are." That broke Harry. His fury reignited, this time not just against William, but against the entire world. "You don't know her like I do," he screamed. "You don't know what we've been through. You're just like the rest of them, always blaming Meghan, always hating her, because she's not one of you." William shook his head, his voice rising now too. "This isn't about Meghan being an outsider. This is about her silence, Harry. Look at her. Look at what she did in court. She said nothing because she didn't need to. She already knew." Harry's roar echoed through the room. He lunged forward, his face inches from William's, his fists trembling at his sides. "Say that again, and I swear." William didn't back down. "What? You'll hit me? Go ahead, Harry." But it won't change the truth. It never will. For a moment, it seemed like Harry might do it, that the years of brotherly love and loyalty had burned away, leaving only rage. His knuckles whitened, his body shook. But then he froze, breathing heavily, tears brimming in his eyes. He turned away, slamming his fists against the window frame instead. The glass rattled but didn't break. William watched, his own chest heaving now. "You need help, Harry. Real help. Before this destroys you completely." Harry spun back, eyes wild. "You think I need help? You think I'm broken?" "No, William. What I need is the truth. And I'll find it, even if I have to burn everything down to get it." The words hung in the air like smoke, poisonous and heavy. William's face hardened. He knew then that his brother wasn't ready to face reality. He wasn't ready to accept facts, or reason, or even love. He was ready for war. And before William could respond, Harry leaned closer, his voice low, his eyes blazing with madness. "Because I know you're hiding something too, William. Something about Archie. And when I find it out, the world will see you for who you really are." The confrontation had crossed a line. Brothers no more, they were enemies now. But then William dropped a revelation that left Harry speechless. While Harry was spiraling into paranoia and William was reeling from their explosive confrontation, Meghan was already moving with quiet precision. If Harry was fire, loud, uncontrollable, destructive, Meghan was ice. Calculated, strategic, unflinching. And while the world focused on Harry's courtroom breakdown, Meghan was holding secret meetings that would shape the next phase of the scandal. Picture it. Discreet cars pulling up to Beverly Hills mansions, exclusive restaurants with private back entrances, hotel suites booked under aliases. Meghan wasn't wasting time crying over DNA results. She was strategizing. She met with lawyers, PR experts, and even old Hollywood acquaintances. Some meetings were whispered about in hushed tones. Her calls to high-powered attorneys specializing in family law, her consultations with crisis managers who had salvaged the reputations of fallen celebrities. The irony is thick, isn't it? Harry was consumed by denial, obsessing over what the DNA test had said. Meanwhile, Meghan seemed to operate as though she already knew. There was no shock in her movements. No hesitation. Only preparation. Ask yourself, doesn't that suggest she was expecting the fallout all along? In one meeting, sources claimed, Meghan laid out a simple but chilling directive to her PR team. "This is not about DNA. This is about image. We control the story, or it controls us." Those words reveal everything about her mindset. To Meghan, the scandal wasn't about truth. It was about perception. She understood that in the public eye, narrative often outweighs fact. And if she could frame herself as the strong, stoic victim beside a husband unraveling in public, she could emerge untouchable. Think about it. Meghan's silence in court wasn't weakness. It was a deliberate stage setting. Because when she eventually spoke, her words would cut through the noise with maximum impact. Her team began crafting statements, rehearsing talking points, building alliances with media outlets sympathetic to her cause. Every move was rehearsed, polished, sharpened. And she wasn't meeting only with lawyers or PR experts. Meghan reached out to old allies too, Hollywood contacts, influential friends, and even figures whispered to have knowledge of royal secrets. Some reports suggested she reconnected with Jessica Mulroney, her once close confidant, fueling speculation that Meghan was building a private army behind the scenes. Others claimed she spoke to American producers about future tell-all projects, quietly setting the stage for an explosive narrative that could eclipse even the DNA revelations. Meanwhile, palace insiders were stunned by what they learned. A royal aide leaked that Meghan had been seen with a powerful divorce attorney, one known for representing high-profile clients in cases involving vast wealth, custody battles, and brutal media wars. The whispers began. Was Meghan preparing to cut Harry loose? To distance herself from the wreckage he was becoming? Harry, of course, had no idea. While he was pacing rooms, muttering about conspiracies and betrayal, Meghan was 2 steps ahead, calmly constructing an exit strategy, or at least a narrative that placed her firmly in control. Here's the contradiction that keeps the audience hooked. Meghan presented herself publicly as the loyal, supportive wife, but her private actions painted a far different picture. Which version was real? Was she the loving duchess standing by her husband's side? Or was she the master strategist plotting her next chapter while he burned? Now imagine being Harry if he discovered these meetings. Already paranoid, already convinced that enemies lurked in every shadow. Learning that Meghan was meeting with lawyers, strategists, and old friends would have shattered what little stability he had left. But here's the chilling truth. He wouldn't have to imagine it. Because one of those meetings, one of those carefully guarded sessions, wasn't as secret as Meghan believed. A message leaked. A single, incriminating message. And when it hit the press, it blew Meghan's strategy wide open. Because in that message, Meghan's real intentions were exposed. And when one of those private messages leaked, the truth about her plan became terrifyingly clear. By dawn the next morning, the story was everywhere. Front pages, rolling news tickers, screaming headlines. Every outlet across the globe was feasting on the drama. The tabloids had found their meal of the decade, and the timing couldn't have been more explosive. Within hours of the DNA revelation, the entire world seemed to turn its attention to one narrative. Prince Harry isn't Archie's father, and Meghan might have known all along. The British tabloids, notorious for their ruthless precision, didn't waste a second. Royal bloodbath screamed one front page. Another plastered Harry's anguished courtroom face beside the words, "Not the father." It was brutal, it was merciless, and it was inescapable. On talk shows, anchors delivered their opening monologues with barely concealed glee. Radio hosts mocked Harry's meltdown. Meme factories on social media churned out gifs of his outburst, looping his red-faced fury with captions like, "When the test results come back and Maury isn't even there." But the frenzy wasn't just ridicule, it was division. Half the internet was united in mocking Harry as delusional, a man cracking under the weight of truth. The other half, however, came to his defense, painting him as a father fighting desperately for his child. And at the center of that firestorm was Meghan's silence. Clips of her expressionless courtroom demeanor went viral. One camp praising her composure as queenly, the other condemning it as soulless. Ask yourself, can a single facial expression change the course of a scandal? In Meghan's case, yes. Because when the public sees a woman unmoved by the collapse of her husband, interpretations multiply. Was it strength? Was it arrogance? Was it guilt? The media pounced on those questions, analyzing every blink, every tilt of her chin. Commentators brought in body language experts to dissect her courtroom behavior frame by frame. The result? A feeding frenzy where silence was louder than Harry's screams. And then came the real twist, the leaked message. Late that night, just as the tabloids were already devouring the DNA scandal, an anonymous source leaked a private communication allegedly tied to Meghan's secret meetings. It wasn't a full transcript. It wasn't even clear who she was speaking to. But the message itself was damning enough. This isn't about Harry anymore. It's about protecting myself and Archie. He'll implode eventually. I just need to stay standing. The press exploded. Overnight, the narrative shifted from Harry's denial to Meghan's strategy. Talk shows replayed the leaked line endlessly. Pundits debated what it meant. Was Meghan admitting she had abandoned Harry? Was she subtly acknowledging the truth of the DNA results? Or was it just another carefully crafted PR line taken out of context? For Harry, the leak was catastrophic. He had been raging against enemies he couldn't see, convinced that the world was conspiring against him. And now, staring at that message, he saw betrayal in the one place he thought was safe. If Meghan was preparing for his implosion, then maybe she had already written him off. For the palace, the media frenzy was a nightmare. The monarchy thrives on control, on carefully sculpted appearances. But here, they were powerless. Every headline was more damning than the last. Every panel discussion chipped away at their mystique. And the worst part? This wasn't a scandal about distant cousins or minor royals. This was the king's son. This was the global face of the modern monarchy. Internationally, the frenzy took on a life of its own. American outlets framed it as a tragic soap opera. The prince, the actress, and the DNA test. Australian news hammered the monarchy for clinging to secrecy. In Africa and Asia, commentators debated whether the Commonwealth should still respect a monarchy crumbling from within. The scandal wasn't just personal, it was geopolitical. And through it all, Harry continued to unravel. Every headline, every meme, every late-night joke cut into him. He wasn't just a man in denial anymore. He was becoming a global punchline. The anger that had exploded in the courtroom turned inward, then outward again, sparking erratic behavior that only fueled more coverage. Paparazzi captured him shouting at aides, slamming car doors, storming away from Meghan during public appearances. Each image became fodder for an insatiable media beast. But here's the kicker. Just when the frenzy seemed unbearable, just when Harry thought the humiliation couldn't get worse, one publication dropped a bombshell even bigger than the DNA results themselves. An investigative piece suggested that the DNA leak wasn't random at all, it was orchestrated. Someone close to Harry had deliberately set him up. And when Harry read that, his paranoia went into overdrive. Because if the results were leaked, if the message was leaked, then someone inside his circle was working against him. And once Harry latched onto that suspicion, there was no going back. But the most explosive article hadn't even been published yet. Every scandal has a leak, but this one was different. It didn't come from some anonymous blogger in a basement or a tabloid fishing for scraps. This leak came from inside. Someone close to Harry, someone he trusted, was feeding information to the press. And when the story broke, it was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. The article dropped without warning. A respected investigative journalist, not the usual sensationalist tabloid writer, published a detailed piece suggesting that the DNA results had been deliberately leaked to humiliate Harry at the exact moment of maximum impact. According to the article, the source wasn't a court clerk or a palisade. It was someone with intimate knowledge of Harry's inner circle. That phrasing alone was enough to send shockwaves through the monarchy. Harry's mind went into overdrive. Who could it be? He replayed every conversation, every meeting, every whispered aside. Could it be one of Meghan's allies? A member of his own security team? Even an old friend? The paranoia consumed him. He began questioning everyone around him, demanding loyalty oaths, firing off late-night messages to confidants asking who had betrayed him. And then came the kicker. The article didn't just reveal that there was a mole. It included details so specific, so intimate, that Harry knew it had to be someone very, very close. References to his private rants, the exact phrasing of his courtroom denials, even details of conversations he'd had with Meghan behind closed doors. The walls were closing in. Have you ever felt that kind of betrayal? The creeping suspicion that the people you let into your life are the very ones tearing it apart? Imagine discovering that someone at your dinner table, someone you hugged, someone you trusted with your darkest fears, was selling you piece by piece to the highest bidder. That's where Harry found himself, angry, paranoid, and spiraling toward madness. The palace, for its part, pretended to know nothing. But behind the scenes, whispers suggested that courtiers had long expected this kind of implosion. Some even suspected the mole wasn't from Harry's camp at all, but from Meghan's. The silence she had wielded in court suddenly seemed more sinister. Was she orchestrating leaks to position herself as the calm, rational partner while Harry unraveled for the world to see? And here's where the contradiction becomes irresistible. Meghan's public composure looked regal, but behind the scenes, her alleged private message, "He'll implode eventually. I just need to stay standing," suddenly looked like a roadmap. Was this all part of her plan? Or was she, too, a victim of betrayal? Harry, of course, couldn't entertain the idea that Meghan herself might be involved. His paranoia spread everywhere else instead. He accused aides of spying, confronted members of his security detail, even lashed out at old friends who tried to check on him. To him, everyone was guilty until proven innocent. And that desperation made him reckless. Because here's the devastating truth. The mole hadn't just leaked the DNA story. They had more. Much more. And they were feeding it to the press in careful, calculated doses. The article promised that new revelations were coming. Revelations that would expose not only Harry's breakdown, but the palace's hidden role in keeping the truth about Archie under wraps. The world braced itself. Every news outlet lined up, waiting for the next installment. Twitter hashtags exploded. Hashtag Royal Mole. Hashtag Who Betrayed Harry. Hashtag Leaked From Within. Talk shows turned into guessing games. Who in Harry's circle had the motive, the access, and the nerve to betray him so spectacularly? And then came the most devastating moment of all. Because Harry found out who the mole was. And when he did, his fury pushed him to the edge. It wasn't a distant aide. It wasn't a faceless clerk. It was someone he never thought would betray him. And once the name came out, nothing could put the pieces back together again. But when Harry discovered who the mole was, His fury pushed him to the edge. They say every man has a breaking point. For Harry, that point came crashing down the moment he discovered the identity of the mole. He had spent days spiraling, pacing the floors of his California mansion like a prisoner in his own mind, replaying every conversation, every detail of the leak. And then, finally, the truth landed. It wasn't some faceless court official. It wasn't a distant royal aide. It wasn't even a tabloid hack with inside contacts. No, the mole was far closer. Too close. The revelation ripped the ground from beneath him. Harry's fury erupted like a volcano, uncontrollable and destructive. He stormed through the house, shouting, slamming doors, smashing objects. Glass shattered, furniture overturned, aides whispered in panic. Meghan, ever calm, watched with those unreadable eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line as though she had expected this all along. But expectation doesn't dull the violence of a meltdown. Harry was unraveling. He roared accusations at everyone around him. Staff members trembled as he demanded to see their phones, their emails, their messages. You think you can betray me? You think I don't see what you're doing? His paranoia consumed him, leaving no space for reason, no space for trust. He looked at everyone as an enemy. And then came the turning point, the moment when his rage turned inward. For hours he locked himself in his study, pacing, ranting, scribbling furious notes, tearing them up, starting again. He shouted at shadows, screamed into the void, demanded answers from ghosts. His mother's image haunted him. Diana, betrayed, hounded, destroyed by the press. I won't let them do this to me, he muttered over and over again, like a mantra. But the more he repeated it, the less convincing it sounded. Have you ever watched someone spiral so fast you almost can't believe it's real? That was Harry in those days. Once the Golden Prince, once the soldier who laughed with comrades in the field, now reduced to a man clawing at walls, his mind consumed by suspicion. Every knock at the door felt like an attack. Every headline felt like a knife. Every silence from Meghan felt like abandonment. He called William late at night, screaming down the phone, demanding answers. You know who did this. You're behind this, aren't you? William, exhausted, furious, tried to reason with him. But reason had left Harry. He hung up before his brother could speak more than a few words. Even Meghan wasn't spared. Why aren't you defending me? He demanded one evening, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. Why aren't you standing up and telling them the truth? Meghan remained calm, as always. Because, Harry, sometimes silence is the strongest defense. Her words, measured and cool, only sent him deeper into madness. To Harry, silence was betrayal. To Meghan, it was strategy. The chasm between them grew wider with each passing hour. The press documented his every stumble. Photos of him leaving meetings with wild eyes, videos of him snapping at paparazzi, grainy footage of him pacing furiously on the balcony of his home. Each clip went viral, each headline more damning than the last. Prince in crisis. Harry's breakdown. From hero to hysteria. But here's the contradiction that kept the public hooked. Harry wasn't entirely wrong. The mole had indeed betrayed him. Information was being leaked deliberately, carefully, destructively. His paranoia was justified, but his response destroyed him. Because instead of calmly exposing the betrayal, he let it consume him until he was the story. The palace watched from a distance, horrified yet vindicated. He's doing our work for us, one aide was overheard saying. The more he unravels, the less anyone believes him. And in a twisted way, that was true. The more Harry fought, the more he raged, the less credible he became. Ask yourself, how far would you go if you discovered someone you trusted had betrayed you? Would you lash out? Would you collapse? Or would you, like Harry, lose yourself in the chaos, letting the betrayal devour you from the inside out? Because Harry's meltdown wasn't just emotional. It was public. It was documented. And it was only getting worse. And just when it seemed he had hit rock bottom, when his rage had burned through everyone in his inner circle, Harry took his meltdown into the one arena he should have avoided at all costs, the public stage. But his most shocking outburst wasn't behind closed doors. It happened in public. It was supposed to be routine. Just another carefully managed public appearance, the kind Harry and Meghan had performed countless times before. Smile for the cameras, wave to the crowd, shake a few hands, make a short speech. then retreat back to the safety of tinted windows and private security. But this time, the tension was already bubbling beneath the surface. Harry was a man on the edge, and the world was about to see it. The event was small by royal standards, a charity fundraiser, nothing like the pomp of a palace gala. Yet every lens in the room was trained on Harry. Not on the children the charity supported, not on the donors sipping champagne. On Harry, the disgraced prince, the man at the center of the DNA scandal. Journalists whispered among themselves, microphones ready, each one praying for a soundbite that could define the next day's headlines. And Harry gave them more than a soundbite. He gave them an explosion. It began with a question. A journalist, bold enough or foolish enough to shout above the crowd, called out, "Prince Harry, do you have any comment about the DNA results? Do you still believe you're Archie's father?" The room froze. All the chatter stopped. Glasses clinked down onto tables. Meghan stiffened, her lips tightening into that same thin, unreadable line she had worn in court. For a moment, it seemed Harry might ignore it. He inhaled sharply, straightened his tie, and prepared to move on. But then, something snapped. He turned, eyes blazing, face flushed. "How dare you?" he roared, his voice echoing through the hall. "How dare you question my son? How dare you question my family?" Gasps rippled through the audience. The cameras clicked like machine guns, capturing every twitch of his face, every vein bulging in his neck. Harry wasn't just angry, he was unhinged. He stormed toward the reporter, jabbing a finger at him. "You think you know the truth? You think a piece of paper means anything? Archie is my son. Do you understand me? He is mine." Security tensed, unsure whether to intervene. Meghan remained still, her expression frozen, her silence once again louder than Harry's fury. Some attendees looked horrified, others fascinated, unable to look away from the spectacle unfolding before them. And then Harry made it worse. He grabbed the microphone from the podium, his voice cracking as he shouted, "This is what they want. They want to break me, to break my family, to make me look insane. Well, I won't let them win." His eyes darted wildly across the crowd, as though searching for invisible enemies hiding among the donors and photographers. Ask yourself, can you imagine the humiliation? A prince, once admired for his military service and humanitarian work, reduced to ranting in front of flashing cameras, insisting the world was conspiring against him. Was this the image Diana dreamed her son would one day project? Or was this the tragic fulfillment of the very paranoia that had haunted her too? By the time Meghan gently placed a hand on his arm, trying to guide him away, the damage was done. Video clips flooded social media within minutes. Harry loses it. Prince in meltdown. Royal rage caught on camera. Hashtags trended worldwide. Late-night hosts were already rehearsing jokes before the event was even over. But it wasn't just comedy. Analysts warned that Harry's breakdown made him look unstable, unfit to be taken seriously. Supporters who once sympathized with his struggles began to waver. Was this a man fighting for truth, or a man unraveling beyond repair? And yet, beneath all the chaos, there was something more sinister brewing. Because amid the flashing cameras and panicked whispers, an envelope slipped quietly into Harry's possession. No cameras caught who delivered it. No microphones picked up the words. But when Harry glanced at the contents, his face drained of color. It wasn't another headline. It wasn't another accusation. It was a letter. A letter written long ago, in handwriting he recognized instantly. And that letter contained secrets darker than any DNA test. But just when it seemed Harry had lost everything, a letter arrived that changed the game. The envelope was unmarked, slipped into Harry's hand so discreetly that not even the ever-vigilant cameras noticed. He barely realized he was holding it until he felt the weight, thin, yet heavy in its significance. Later, when he was back inside his car, Meghan stone-faced beside him, Harry tore it open with trembling fingers. What he found inside nearly stopped his heart. It was a letter. Old, faded, the ink slightly smudged with time. And the handwriting, he knew it instantly. His mother's. Diana's elegant, flowing script stared back at him like a ghost reaching through the years. Harry's breath caught. He traced the lines with his finger, his mind racing. How was this possible? Why now? Why here, at the height of his unraveling? Had someone kept this from him all these years? Or was this a cruel trick meant to drive him further into madness? The words inside were brief, but devastating. Diana spoke of truths the crown will never admit, of secrets buried to protect the institution, not the family. And then, a single line that cut Harry's soul in half. If ever you doubt what they tell you about blood, remember, the palace lies when it must. Those words seared into Harry's mind. His paranoia, already consuming him, now had fuel poured onto the flames. To him, this wasn't just a note. It was confirmation, from his own mother, that the monarchy was capable of lying about bloodlines, about family, about paternity. Was Diana writing about herself? About Charles? About William? Or about him? The ambiguity was maddening, and Harry clung to it as though it were a lifeline. To the rest of the world, DNA results might be fact. But to Harry, this letter was truth. A mother's warning, a prophecy come alive. He shoved the letter into his jacket, shielding it from Meghan's gaze. For the first time in weeks, he didn't want to share. He didn't want her to read it, to analyze it, to turn it into a strategy. This was his mother's voice, his secret weapon. But secrecy is a dangerous game. And Meghan noticed. She saw the way his hands shook, the way his eyes widened, the way he guarded that envelope as though it were more precious than his crown. "What is it?" she asked quietly, her tone controlled, almost rehearsed. Harry shook his head violently. "Nothing. Just nothing." That was a lie, and Meghan knew it. Later that night, Harry returned to the letter, reading it over and over on.